In the annals of British India, few events capture the delicate tensions of colonial rule like the rare mutinies of European troops. While the Sepoy Rebellion of 1857 is widely remembered, the story of the Europeans, those supposedly secure and privileged within the East India Company's hierarchy, often remains obscured. Yet, on two distinct occasions, the white soldiers of the company and later the crown rose, not against foreign enemies, but against their own command. The first occurred in 1766 at the fortress of Monghir in Bengal. The second unfolded nearly a century later, from 1858 to 1859, following the Crown's assumption of direct authority in India. Though separated by time and circumstance, both episodes illuminate the fragile balance of discipline, privilege, and identity within the colonial armies, revealing how even Europe's elite in India could challenge the empire. In this video, the White Indian Mutinies, we delve into two astonishing uprisings that history has largely forgotten. Revolts not by India's oppressed, but by the empire's own European soldiers. Imagine the shock in London when whispers spread that the very men entrusted to uphold British power in India had turned their muskets against their superiors. These mutinies, one at the remote fortress of Monghir in 1766, the other in the turbulent years after 1858, exposed deep cracks in the colonial order. They reveal that the empire's greatest threat sometimes came not from the battlefield beyond its walls, but from within its own ranks. Bengal in the 1760s was a land transformed. The company, having secured the right to collect revenue in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, wielded power, both military and civil. Forts dotted the banks of the Ganges, strategically placed to guard trade routes, enforce order, and project company authority deep into the hinterland. Among these, Monghir, an imposing fort perched on the river's bend, stood as a symbol of British power in eastern India. It was here that European officers, accustomed to privilege and long accustomed to a steady flow of allowances known as bata, would first challenge the limits of the company's authority. The bata was more than mere compensation. It was a marker of status, a tangible acknowledgement of the hardships and dangers inherent in colonial service. European officers stationed in Bengal, Bihar, and the frontier regions had long enjoyed the double bata, a supplement designed to make distant postings bearable and reinforce loyalty. Yet Robert Clive, ever focused on consolidating the company's finances and centralizing authority, deemed this allowance excessive and disruptive to discipline. When the double bata was reduced in early 1766, it sparked not just frustration, but an emboldened sense of grievance among officers, setting the stage for one of the earliest European mutinies in India. As the rainy season crept over the plains, tensions simmered in the fortresses of Bengal. Officers whispered in mess halls and over candlelit desks, sharing frustrations and fears. By the time news reached Clive, a carefully orchestrated plot was already taking shape, one that threatened to strike at the heart of the company's military structure. Across miles of river and jungle, the seeds of dissent were quietly sown, and the stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only military discipline, but the very character of colonial authority. The fortress of Monghir, with its high stone walls and riverine bastions, was usually a place of order and routine. Soldiers drilled on the parade ground beneath the hot Bengal sun, while officers reviewed accounts, inspected stores, and maintained the delicate balance of authority. But in the spring of 1766, an undercurrent of unease rippled through the European ranks. The reduction of the double bata had struck at pride and pocket alike, and whispers grew into murmurs of organized defiance. Inside the officers' mess, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and frustration. Captains and majors, many of them young men from gentry families, spoke in hushed tones about the injustice of the pay cuts. To them, the bata was not merely money. It was a symbol of honor, of recognition for years of distant service, of the social standing they had carved for themselves in the company's Indian dominion. Losing it felt like a personal affront, a sign that the company, and by extension their superiors, no longer valued their commitment. Secret meetings were held under the cover of darkness. Paper slips passed between fingers, letters moved surreptitiously through corridors, and subtle signals, knocked sequences on walls, small marks etched on gateposts, indicated gathering points. By late April, the officers had formed a pact. Unless their allowances were restored, every officer would resign on a set date, effectively paralyzing the company's European command in Bengal. The plan, daring and clandestine, reflected both their ambition and their confidence in the cohesion of their class. They believed they could assert their will through solidarity alone. But Robert Clive, ever vigilant and shrewd, had received word of the unrest. He understood immediately the danger posed not merely by the pay cut, but by the European officers' audacity to challenge authority. Delay could allow the conspiracy to spread, perhaps drawing in civilian sympathizers in Calcutta or elsewhere. Swift action was imperative. Clive's response was as decisive as it was calculated. He mobilized reinforcements from across Bengal and Madras, sending cadets, loyal officers, and sepoy battalions to Mongia. The journey was arduous. Rivers swollen with monsoon rains, forests thick with undergrowth, and roads churned to mud under relentless tropical storms. Yet Clive pressed on, understanding that the morale of the company's forces depended on the perception of speed and control. Every day he delayed increased the mutineers' confidence. Every mile he advanced weakened it. Meanwhile, inside Mongia, tension escalated. Officers whispered about the approaching governor, speculating on whether he would negotiate or act with severity. Soldiers sensed the unease, but did not yet know whom to trust. The fort, usually a symbol of impenetrable strength, felt claustrophobic. Each cannon and battlement now a potential instrument of confrontation. On the morning of May 14th, Clive's plan came to fruition. Under cover of dawn, loyal sepoy battalions quietly secured the fort's key artillery positions, encircling the European barracks without fanfare. From their vantage points, the cannons and muskets could dominate the parade grounds. The European officers, faced with the realization that their insurrection had been anticipated and countered, felt the first pangs of doubt. Their rebellion, meticulously plotted in secrecy, now faced the unyielding reality of organized resistance. The following day, Clive arrived in person. Tall, resolute, and radiating authority, he moved through the fort with measured steps. There was no display of force beyond what was necessary, no flurry of shouting or threats. Yet his presence alone carried the weight of consequence. He addressed the officers, forbidding violence, but making it clear that continued defiance would be met with the full force of martial law. The message was simple, unequivocal. Mutiny would not be tolerated, regardless of the conspirators' class or status. Faced with Clive's calm but formidable authority, the mutiny dissolved. The ringleaders were dismissed, their careers effectively ended, while junior officers and subalterns were allowed to resign with dignity. The European soldiers, many of whom had hoped for a dramatic confrontation, returned to their routines under the careful watch of the loyal sepoys. In this extraordinary reversal, it was the Indian soldiers who preserved order while the Europeans faltered, an irony that would echo almost a century later during the White Mutiny. The Mongir Mutiny left a lasting imprint on the company's military culture. Clive's swift and decisive action underscored the primacy of discipline and the limited tolerance for dissent, even among Europe's elite. The episode revealed that loyalty could not be assumed by birthright or rank alone, and that authority required both strategy and courage. Above all, it demonstrated that the colonial army, for all its hierarchical structure and European dominance, was deeply reliant on the loyalty of its Indian troops, a lesson that would resonate painfully in 1857. In the years following the Mongir Mutiny, Bengal and the broader Indian territories of the East India Company underwent profound transformation. Clive's decisive handling of the 1766 rebellion had sent a clear message. Even the privileged European officer was subordinate to the company's authority. Discipline was paramount, and the company's administration became increasingly centralized. Yet beneath the surface, the seeds of future unrest were quietly germinating. The European officers who remained in India after Mongir carried with them a heightened awareness of their vulnerability. They were men accustomed to privilege, but reminded that authority was never absolute. Many of these officers, particularly in the Bengal army, had built their lives around the duality of military command and colonial opportunity. They occupied a unique social stratum, blending martial identity with commercial and social influence, often interwoven with European civilians and merchants in Calcutta. Their wealth, rank, and prestige were closely tied to the allowances and conditions of colonial service. Over the ensuing decades, the East India Company's European regiments in India became increasingly distinct from their counterparts in the British Army stationed in Europe. They were recruited primarily for service in India, with careers measured in postings and seniority rather than purchase of commissions. Pay scales, allowances, and privileges set them apart. Officers enjoyed colonial allowances, extra rations, and opportunities for wealth accumulation, while their subalterns aspired to rise through a merit and seniority system unique to the presidencies. These distinctions fostered a sense of identity and, at times, entitlement. By the mid-19th century, the company's European regiments had grown into cohesive insular communities. Their lives revolved around forts, cantonments, and the rhythm of campaigns against regional powers. Officers' clubs, mess halls, and social gatherings reinforced a culture that celebrated European superiority and the special status of the soldier in India. Within this closed world, traditions hardened, privileges became expectations, and loyalty to the company became intertwined with personal and social identity. Yet this very sense of distinctiveness sowed the seeds for future conflict. When the Indian Rebellion erupted in 1857, European regiments of the company largely remained loyal, their cohesion and pride a counterbalance to the widespread sepoy mutinies. Their steadfastness was praised, yet it also revealed the fragility of their loyalties. These men valued recognition, respect, and material benefits as much as honor. Any threat to their status could provoke unrest, as would soon be the case in 1858. The transfer of India from company to crown after the 1857 rebellion introduced a new challenge. The royal proclamation that dissolved the company and incorporated its European regiments into the British Army threatened the carefully cultivated privileges of these soldiers. Allowances, pay structures, and the autonomy of the presidency armies were to be aligned with British Army regulations, effectively erasing the distinctions that had defined a generation of European soldiers in India. For officers and men who had long considered themselves a separate elite force, the change was more than bureaucratic. It was a profound challenge to identity and honor. The social dynamics within the European regiments intensified the tension. Officers who had risen through the company system saw themselves as equals of the highest British Army rank. Subalterns and enlisted men, accustomed to the colonial hierarchy and its rewards, feared demotion or reduction of their allowances. Class and privilege were central to their perception of worth, and the loss of these benefits was experienced as a personal affront. Unlike in Mongear, where loyalty to the company could be appealed to with force, in 1858-59, the authorities faced soldiers whose allegiance depended as much on respect, status, and reward as on any sense of duty. Meanwhile, the Indian soldiers of the Bengal Army had also experienced change. Post-1857, their loyalty had been secured through careful recalibration of recruitment, pay, and postings. While the European officers fretted over diminished privileges, the sepoys were being courted to remain faithful, reinforcing the notion that control of the colonial army was as much a social and psychological exercise as a military one. In this way, the stage was set for the Second European Rebellion, the White Mutiny. The grievances were different from Mongear. They were not merely about allowances cut by a reform-minded governor, but about a systemic transformation of military identity. The European soldiers felt their career, social standing, and the entire structure of their life in India was under threat. Unlike Mongear, the White Mutiny would be largely passive, a refusal to comply rather than an armed insurrection. But the underlying dynamics were strikingly similar. Privilege, expectation, and identity colliding with authority. The streets of Calcutta in 1858 were alive with the residual tension of the recent rebellion. The air carried the mingled sense of river traffic, spice markets, and smouldering embers from burned villages. The East India Company had been dissolved, its power transferred to the British Crown. For the Indian population, this marked a new era of governance. For the European soldiers of the company's regiments, it marked a profound and unwelcome disruption to their world. Unlike the dramatic confrontational mutiny at Mongear, the White Mutiny was subtle and pervasive. It was defined not by cannon fire or bayonet charges, but by passive resistance. Orders from British authorities to integrate the company's European regiments into the British Army were met with quiet defiance. Officers refused to parade, to accept new postings, or to acknowledge the new administrative hierarchy. Within the forts and cantonments, the usual rhythm of military life, drills, inspections, and daily routines, was disrupted, replaced by tense uncertainty and whispered speculation. The grievances were clear. Officers and men alike resented the threat to their allowances, pay, and privileges. Many had spent decades cultivating their positions in India, building networks of influence and investing in property and social ties. The Crown's reorganization threatened not just their income, but their identity. These men had long considered themselves distinct, elite, and integral to the colonial order. To be folded into the British Army without recognition of their status was to challenge that very self-conception. Within the barracks and mess halls, discussions swirled like a summer storm. Captains spoke in measured tones about options and consequences, weighing resignation against compliance. Subalterns feared the loss of allowances that had sustained them through distant postings. The men collectively understood that their protest had to be disciplined. Any overt violence could provoke reprisals and tarnish their standing, while coordinated inaction could force concessions. In this tension-filled atmosphere, colonial authorities faced a delicate balancing act. Unlike Clive at Mongir, there was no immediate threat of armed rebellion. Yet the Crown recognized that the European soldiers' compliance could not be assumed. Officials navigated the crisis with caution, offering pathways that preserved dignity while maintaining authority. Soldiers were permitted to resign and return to Britain, retaining pay and benefits. Many chose this path, boarding ships bound for London under watchful eyes, leaving behind the forts and cantonments that had defined their adult lives. The withdrawal of officers and soldiers was both orderly and profound. Ports and riverbanks saw lines of Europeans embarking on ships, their faces etched with resignation, pride, and a hint of defiance. The forts, once bustling centers of European power, felt emptier, a quiet testament to the upheaval that had passed without a single musket fired. The European regiments, once symbols of company dominance and elite privilege, had demonstrated that loyalty could not be demanded when identity and honor were perceived to be under threat. The White Mutiny, though bloodless, left an indelible mark on colonial governance. It illustrated the limits of authority, even over the empire's most elite soldiers, and underscored the importance of negotiation, recognition, and careful management of social hierarchies. Whereas Mongir had required decisive military action to reassert control, while the 1858 to 1859 mutiny required diplomacy, patience, and respect for the European soldiers' sense of self. Both, however, shared a fundamental truth. In India, authority rested not solely on force, but on the intricate interplay of status, identity, and loyalty. The Mongir Mutiny of 1766 and the White Mutiny of 1858 to 59, separated by nearly a century, occupy a rare place in the history of British India. Moments when European soldiers, the ostensibly most privileged and disciplined agents of empire, turned against their own authorities. Though the circumstances and methods differed, both incidents illuminate the enduring tensions of colonial military life, the fragility of loyalty, and the profound impact of social hierarchy on the exercise of authority. At Mongir, the rebellion was immediate and confrontational. European officers, outraged by the reduction of their allowances, organized a coordinated withdrawal, threatening to resign en masse. Their audacity challenged not only the authority of Robert Clive, but the very idea of hierarchical discipline within the company's European regiments. Clive's swift action, mobilizing loyal sepoys, securing artillery positions, and personally confronting the officers, demonstrated that authority depended not only on rank, but on decisiveness, intelligence, and strategic acumen. The mutiny collapsed without bloodshed, yet it revealed that privilege alone could not safeguard one's position. Loyalty was conditional, contingent on recognition and respect for rank and reward. The White Mutiny, nearly a century later, unfolded under dramatically different circumstances. European soldiers of the company's regiments faced the administrative transformation of their entire world, the dissolution of the East India Company, and their absorption into the British Army. Unlike Mongir, where force was required, the White Mutiny relied on collective non-compliance and negotiation. Officers refused to obey new regulations, paraded less frequently, and pressed their grievances subtly but resolutely. The Crown's response was cautious, offering resignation with pay and allowances, preserving dignity while maintaining authority. The episode demonstrated that European soldiers' loyalty, was tied not only to orders but to identity, privilege, and social recognition. Ultimately, the Mongir and White Mutinies underscore the paradox of colonial power. The Europeans, ostensibly the instruments of domination, were themselves vulnerable to the pressures of expectation, privilege, and identity. Their revolts, separated by nearly a century, reveal a persistent truth. Authority in India depended as much on perception, negotiation, and social hierarchy as on military might. In both cases, the empire survived, but not without learning that even its most elite soldiers could challenge its power when their sense of honor, identity, and entitlement was perceived to be under threat. The White Indian Mutinies remain a testament to the delicate balance of power, loyalty, and social dynamics within colonial armies. They are a reminder that history is not shaped solely by battles with foreign foes, but also by the complex relationships within the institutions of power themselves. From the ramparts of Mongir to the quiet ports of 1859, these stories reveal the human dimensions of empire, the pride, resentment, and courage that underlie the grand narratives of conquest and administration. In the end, the mutinies of 1766 and 1858-59 illuminate not just the mechanics of military discipline, but the enduring fragility of authority when confronted with the intertwined forces of identity, privilege, and human ambition. If you found this story of the Mongir Mutiny and the White Mutiny as fascinating as we did, there's so much more history waiting to be uncovered. These are the stories that shape the very foundations of empires, stories often hidden in the margins of textbooks, but essential to understanding our past. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the untold tales of history's most pivotal moments. Click the notification bell so you're the first to know when we release a new episode. Hit the like button if you enjoyed today's story, and share this video with anyone who loves uncovering the hidden dynamics behind major historical events. Join the conversation in the comments below. What surprised you most about the Mongir Mutiny or the White Mutiny? We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. History isn't just about the past. It's a dialogue we continue today.